I heard the applause before I saw the room. Standing outside the glass doors of the conference center, I felt like a ghost, invisible in a building I once designed down to the placement of every light switch. They were clapping for him, for the man who called himself CEO, my replacement, my thief. And that was only the beginning. Inside, the logo I had sketched on a napkin in a Brooklyn diner glowed 10 feet tall on the LED screen. Clean, polished, lifeless. He stood beneath it, thanking the board, outlining the new vision. He used my words, twisted, my roadmap, gutted, my team, dismantled. In his hand, my prototype, but repackaged, renamed, and locked behind an API I didn't recognize. I turned before he could finish, walked past the security guards who didn't know my face anymore, past the front desk where I used to bring donuts every Friday, past the awards in the lobby that still bore my name, though no one looked close enough to read them. I stopped outside, feeling the sharp winter air hit my lungs. That was when it started, the real unraveling. Not the betrayal. That came later. First, I had to remember where it all began. I started thinking about when it all began. It wasn't much, just a microwave sparking in a studio apartment in Crown Heights. Wires duct taped to the walls, extension cords looping across the floor like snakes. The screen blinked, EO0G0, dead. I'd been up for 3 nights straight, debugging an early version of our predictive engine. My model kept hallucinating correlations that didn't exist. I remember slamming my palm against the microwave door, not in anger, just to see if it would jolt back to life. It didn't. But the laptop screen did. A new result, stable. Predictive match, 97. 3. I stared at the number, heart racing. Then the fuse blew and everything went dark. I lit a candle, wrote the number down in Sharpie on the wall. I didn't know it yet, but that model would later save a Fortune 500 company from collapse, and make me, for a time, the youngest founder on the NASDAQ. Back then, it was just me and Mason. He was the only person who got it, who didn't laugh when I said machine learning could see what CFOs missed. We coded side by side for months, took showers at the gym, pitched on folding chairs with coffee-stained decks. The product worked. The engine got smarter. Then came the meetings. Then came the money. I blinked, pulled out of memory by a group of interns walking past me in branded hoodies. They were laughing. One of them looked barely 20. That used to be me. And now, I wasn't even listed on the company's Our Story page. How do you get erased from your own life? I checked my phone. No messages, no alerts. Silence had become a kind of soundtrack. I had spent months avoiding lawyers, therapy, old friends who wanted to say sorry. But this morning something had shifted. It started with an email from a dead address. Mine. Just one line. They activated clause 17(3). You know what that means. At first I thought it was spam. Then I checked the archive, a folder I hadn't opened in years. And there it was. A clause I had buried in the founding documents out of pure paranoia. If terminated without cause, the original founder reserves the right to reclaim 100 of the entity's voting shares for a symbolic transaction of $1. I laughed, out loud. Not because it was funny, but because it sounded like something from a bad Netflix script. Then I stopped laughing. Because it was real, and they had fired me without cause. My hands were shaking as I scrolled further. A second message. From Mason. Tell me where to meet. I've been waiting. I looked back up at the glass tower. My tower. The laughter was gone. So was the doubt. This wasn't over. Not by a long shot. They thought I wouldn't show up. That I'd disappear into some startup graveyard with the rest of the burned-out founders. But I watched them. I watched everything. From across the street, the lobby's glass reflected the same sterile energy they'd poured into the company since I left. Keycards, lanyards, performance reviews, instead of all hands around a whiteboard. I saw Jonathan, the new CFO, sipping a green smoothie, laughing too loudly. His voice always had that hollow pitch when he lied. He was lying now. Next to him, Amanda. She used to run ops like a field general. She was the one who fought me hardest when I resisted the acquisition. I remember her whispering in that boardroom, "It's either we scale or we die." And maybe she was right, maybe. But the version they built didn't scale, it swelled. Like a tumor. I crossed the street. Nobody recognized me, hoodie up, 2-day stubble, a different posture. I let the revolving door spin me in. Stood in the back of the elevator with a delivery guy. Watched floor numbers flicker. 9, strategy. 10, data. 11, legal. I knew every inch of this building, every secret room, every nameplate. Except mine. I got off on 12. The old floor, engineering, dead quiet. What used to be chaos, Red Bulls, shouting, half-built features on glass walls, was now a soft murmur of keystrokes. Nobody looked up. They didn't know this place was born in fire, that these desks were cut from plywood in Mason's garage. One of the new hires looked at me, blinked. I moved past him without a word. Back then, we built for the sheer adrenaline of solving something nobody else could. Now, there were compliance posters on the walls, a sign that said, "Clean code, clean conscience." God. I walked into the old war room. They hadn't changed the password on the conference tablet. Of course not. The meeting notes told me everything. Q4 forecasts, churn rate, founder narrative pivot. That last one made me pause. I clicked it open. The plan was simple. Scrub me out. Reframe the company's origin story around a vision of collective innovation. Whatever that meant. There was a photo of the leadership team. Mason wasn't in it. I pulled out my phone, called him. He picked up on the first ring. "You went in?" he asked. "Yeah, it's worse than I thought." He paused. "I told you, they're gutting the soul out of it." "Are you still on the inside?" "Until Friday, then they cut my contract." "They think you're harmless." "That's the plan." I hung up. My hand rested on the glass table. Same one we bought from a liquidated fintech 3 years ago. I could still see the scratch I made with my keys during the Series A call. It looked deeper now. Or maybe I was just seeing clearly. The hallway lights flickered, or maybe I imagined it. I walked out. Back in my apartment, I pulled out the folder, the real one, with the original docs. Mason had kept his copies too, but mine had the annotations. The ones the lawyers never saw, Clause 17. 3 wasn't just a joke, it was a trigger. If executed properly and only under very specific terms, public dismissal without documented cause, the founder had a path to claim. A legal trapdoor. It wouldn't survive court scrutiny today. But back then, the language was muddy enough to exploit. I ran a search on the termination email they sent me, phrased clean. Too clean, but they slipped. The internal memo attached used the words non-critical exit. No documentation, no formal reason. That was the window. I stared at the dollar bill on my desk, the one I had framed years ago as a joke. What it all started with. I took it out, laid it flat. This wasn't a comeback, not yet. This was just the moment I stopped bleeding. The first cut had clotted, and I was starting to feel dangerous again. The notary's office was 2 blocks from the courthouse, sandwiched between a vape shop and a place that sold knockoff sneakers. I went there at noon, dressed like a man nobody would stop, suit from a wedding I never attended, briefcase I hadn't touched in years. The receptionist didn't even blink when I handed her the form. "I'll call you when she's ready," she said, nodding toward a row of cracked leather chairs. 15 minutes. I sat there staring at the scuffed tile, rehearsing the sentence in my head. I am executing my right under Clause 17. 3 of the original founding agreement. I had said it out loud once. It sounded surreal, like I was quoting a version of myself I hadn't met yet. The notary called my name. Room 3, small, dim, reeked of toner. I signed the document, slid the framed dollar across the table. She didn't ask. She just stamped, sealed, and passed it back. "That's all?" I asked. She looked up. "If it's legally binding, it's binding. Depends on who you're about to piss off." I left with the papers in my hand and the weight of inevitability in my throat. That night, I met Mason at the back of a closed laundromat. We'd used it once before, during the first prototype trials, when we didn't trust Google Drive or each other. He was already there, hoodie up, typing furiously. "They're restructuring next week," he said without turning. "They'll announce it as a strategic refocus." "And the layoffs?" 25% minimum. They're keeping just enough talent to license the IP. I stepped closer. Then they think they've won. He looked at me finally. They don't even think about you anymore. That hit deeper than it should have. He pointed to the screen. But you're still in the founder registry. Delaware records don't lie. You trigger the clause, you show the documentation, and it's technically yours again. On paper. Technically was the word that would get me sued or worshipped. Maybe both. I handed him the envelope. He opened it like it was radioactive. This is real, I nodded. Stamped, dated. Filed in 2 jurisdictions. Mason exhaled, slow. What's the plan? I paused. Not revenge. He raised an eyebrow. Not yet, I said. The next step was Claire. She was the only one who knew the full architecture. DevSec lead, pre-acquisition, left when they started outsourcing back-end to overseas firms. I found her in a dive bar in Hoboken, nursing a soda and tapping Morse code into the wood with her nail. She didn't look surprised when she saw me. Thought you'd be in Bali by now, she said. I thought you'd be running Google by now. Touché. I sat beside her. I'm invoking the clause. She didn't react, just took a sip. Finally. You knew I'd come? No, but I knew they'd ruin it. We didn't speak for a full minute. The jukebox wheezed out some old synth-pop track from the early 2000s. Then she said, what do you need? Proof that the current leadership broke protocol, cut ethical corners, fired engineers under NDA without compensation. Anything that shows they're bleeding the system. Claire looked at me like she was deciding if I deserved the truth. Then she said, give me 3 days. I stood up. We launched the second version next month. No brands, no press, just signal. She smiled. And what do you call this new version? I looked down at the folded dollar in my pocket. Base 1. She laughed, short and sharp. God, you're dramatic. I leaned in. You have no idea. Back home, I wiped my whiteboard clean. For the first time in a year, it was mine again. No stakeholder jargon, no investor dates, just the system. I drew the new engine from scratch. No legacy code, no tracking, no permission from anyone but the user. And in the bottom right corner, I wrote the phrase I hadn't allowed myself to say out loud for months. Built by a founder, not a brand. I stood there staring at it. Then I circled it once, twice. Hard enough to smear the marker. They wanted silence, compliance, absence. Instead, I was writing the next version. From the ruins. With witnesses, they sent the letter on a Friday, classic. Legal envelope, thick paper, corporate watermark pressed so deep it cut shadows into the fibers. The tone was cold, efficient. We are aware of your attempt to assert control over redacted and remind you that such actions constitute a violation of your separation agreement, Clause 4. 1. I read it once, then again. Nowhere did they mention Clause 17. 3. They didn't acknowledge it at all, because they knew. Because ignoring something is easier than admitting it's real. I dropped the letter onto the counter, beside a cracked coffee mug and a stack of napkin diagrams. My hands stayed in my pockets. That old instinct, don't touch what you can't fix. Mason texted 5 minutes later, they're scared. That's their scared voice. But fear doesn't mean retreat. On Monday, they started the cleanup. First, they deleted my internal credentials, even the dead ones. Old Slack channels vanished, Git logs scrubbed. Then came the Whisper campaign. Investors I hadn't heard from in a year suddenly reached out, all with the same rehearsed concern. Just checking in. Everything all right? Heard you were going through something. Going through something? Like this was grief, not strategy. Then I saw the job post. Chief Vision Officer, replacing founder role. Must bring fresh energy. Replacing. They were scrubbing my existence and selling the residue. I showed up at the tech conference out of spite. I had no badge, no invite, just a free pass scavenged from an ex-mentor who owed me nothing but pity. My name wasn't on any panel, but the company's booth was center stage, sleek, sterile, packed. Amanda was there. Her laugh cut through the noise like glass. I watched her talk to a VC who used to call me a genius. He nodded along, hanging on her pitch. She mentioned founder resilience without blinking. My phrase, word for word. I stepped closer. We locked eyes. She froze, just for a second, then turned back to the VC like I wasn't there, like I was a stain on the carpet. I leaned in, low enough for her to hear. Still taste the blood. She flinched. Her mask cracked, barely, but it was enough. The VC blinked, confused. I walked away before he could ask questions. That night they struck harder. Mason called, frantic. They sent a takedown request. The new repo gone. What grounds? Trademark infringement. They're calling Base 1 a derivative work. They don't own the engine. They say they do. I sat in silence. He added quieter, and Claire's off the grid. That hit harder than it should have. I knew what it meant. Corporate pressure, threats, maybe worse. Claire wouldn't run unless someone had given her a reason. I stared at my screen, blank, no code, no diagrams, no base, nothing. My mind spiraled. What if they were right? What if this was all some ego trap, a desperate man clawing back at a world that had already moved on? I stood, too fast, knocked over a chair. My breath came sharp. The walls felt closer than before, like they were leaning in. I grabbed the whiteboard and shoved it flat, erased everything, scrubbed until the marker smeared into my palms. I pressed my forehead to the cold surface. Silence. Then, from somewhere in the chaos, a sound. A knock. Slow, deliberate. I opened the door, and there she was. Claire, hair wet from rain, hoodie zipped to the neck, no bag, no words. I stepped aside. She entered like a ghost. Told you 3 days, she said. I stared. She pulled a flash drive from her pocket, set it on the table. Everything you need, proof of ethics violations, internal memos, screenshots, audio. My voice cracked. They got to you. She didn't deny it. They tried, she said, but I've been building something too. Insurance. I nodded, slow. This wasn't a comeback story. Not yet. It was still a collapse. But now, I had rubble to work with. We spread it all out on the floor, printed emails, audio transcripts, server logs Claire had decrypted on the train. The living room looked like a crime board. No red string, but the lines were clear. They had lied. Not just to me, to regulators, clients, even their own board. Ghost firings, compliance reports rewritten after signature. The worst, biometric data used in stress testing without user consent. Claire had it all. Dates, names, metadata. This, she said, tapping a spreadsheet, could bury them. I didn't answer right away. I was staring at one of the early memos, a fake product roadmap Amanda had sent to investors. It claimed we were moving toward full automation, total platform independence. What she didn't say, we'd already hit those goals, months earlier. She just needed a reason to fire engineers and sell the narrative of innovation. I remembered that week. 3 devs gone. 3. One cried in the stairwell. We don't just take them down, I finally said. We show the truth. Let people decide who they want to follow. Claire nodded. So what's the play? I looked at the flash drive. We don't publish this. Not yet. We leak just enough to crack the glass. And the rest? We use it to build something real. The next day, I walked into a law firm I hadn't entered in years. It smelled like old wood and new ink. Jameson, my first lawyer, the one who drafted Clause 17. 3 was still there, older, slower, but sharper than ever. He read the document in silence, then looked up at me over his glasses. You always were a sneaky bastard. Is it enforceable? He leaned back. In theory, yes. In practice, they'll fight like hell, try to bleed you out in court. I'm not looking for court. Then what are you looking for? I handed him a separate envelope, the evidence Claire pulled. His eyes scanned the top page, then he whistled low. This isn't strategy. This is a bomb. I'm not lighting it, I'm holding it where they can see it. He grinned. They'll blink, especially if you have a stage. I nodded. I need a stage. I called Mason that night. He answered on speaker, mid-commute. You remember Branson's? I asked. The old warehouse? Still has power, and I think it's time we brought the team back. He was quiet for a beat. You serious? They fired me, but they didn't fire the mission. You think they'll come? They didn't sign up for corporate. They signed up for this. He laughed. Not because it was funny, because it was dangerous. You crazy bastard. All right, I'll call them. And tell them, I added, come empty-handed. We're not rebuilding, we're rewriting. The warehouse looked exactly as I remembered, hollow, echoing, half-lit by skylights dusted in grime. We used to crash here during launch sprints, curled in sleeping bags between routers and ramen. Now, a few plastic tables, an extension cord army, and 6 people who hadn't been in the same room since the first funding round. Claire, Mason, Zoe from front-end, Luis from UX, Danny from support, and Arjun, our systems whisperer. They didn't ask for speeches, they just unpacked laptops and plugged in. Zoe was the first to speak. So, what are we building? I looked around. No slides, no pitch deck, just the hunger in their eyes, the one I thought I'd lost. We're not fixing the past, I said. We're building what it should have been. Luis raised a brow. Which is? I smiled. Something no one can steal. Danny snapped her gum. That's a tagline. Arjun muttered, I already cloned the repo, clean base. Claire slid the drive across the table. And here's what we're not telling the world, yet. The hum of fans, the tap of keys, the sound of something beginning. No noise, no hype, no announcement, just proof of life. We dropped the teaser anonymously, 3 lines of code and a timestamp. Buried in a forum thread no investor would ever read. No branding, no names. Just a silent pulse for those who knew what to look for. Within 12 hours, the file had over 100 forks. Within 24, 5,000. By the 3rd day, our inboxes were full. Is this what I think it is? Where's the repo? Tell me you're back. We didn't answer. We just kept building. Branson's turned into a war room. Claire rigged an air-gapped system for the sensitive data. Arjun rebuilt the pipeline architecture from scratch, muttering to himself like an exorcist. Zoe and Luis designed a UI that made the old one look like a school project. Danny handled comms, discreet, surgical. Her job, manage curiosity without confirming a damn thing. And me? I stopped thinking like a founder. I started thinking like an infiltrator. I tracked user behavior from our forked engine, mapped IPs, noticed patterns. One of the biggest traffic sources, internal, from inside the company that threw me out. They were watching us, trying to figure out if it was real. It was. 2 weeks in, Mason pulled me aside. You need to talk to them. To who? The old users, the ones we left behind. They didn't leave, they got abandoned. Same difference, they're still out there. He handed me a phone, encrypted chat. Someone named Kite had been sending messages daily. First, just code snippets. Then, I know what Amanda did. I didn't respond. I waited 3 days. Then I typed, prove it. They sent a photo, screenshot of a dashboard, access logs, IP trails. Amanda had been logging into a shadow admin panel for 6 months, rerouting enterprise clients to dummy contracts, skimming analytics before they hit the board. It wasn't just unethical, it was criminal. I showed it to Claire. She didn't speak, just nodded once. We leak that, I said, and it all burns. Or, she said, we let it cook. The next move was social. Danny orchestrated it like a symphony. We rented a booth at a mid-tier developer expo under a shell name, Signal Route. No signage, no flashy banners, just a single monitor looping one sentence, rebuilt, not replaced. People stopped. They asked questions. We gave them nothing, just a QR code that led to a private waitlist. By the end of the weekend, over 10,000 sign-ups, most with corporate emails. We were drawing them out. Amanda's team sent out a cease and desist, but it wasn't addressed to anyone, because we hadn't claimed anything. We were a rumor, and rumors are harder to kill than facts. Then came the email. From Amanda herself. Subject, let's talk. No body, no signature, just a meeting link. Mason stared at the screen. It's a trap. Of course it is. You going? I built the trap. She's just trying to figure out where the spikes are. I joined the call from a hotel lobby in Soho. Loud enough to drown out audio, quiet enough to be legal. Her face appeared, perfectly lit. Lipstick a shade too calm for the tone. "You've made quite a mess," she said. "I'm just sweeping the ashes." She leaned in. "You don't want to go to war." I smiled. "I'm already at war. You just thought I was dead." Amanda tapped her pen once, twice. "What do you want?" "Truth." She snorted. "That's not a product." "No. But it sells better than lies." Pause. Then, "You leak that data, you'll hurt everyone. Clients, employees, yourself." I leaned closer. "Then maybe you should fire yourself before I do it for you." I ended the call, not because I had won, because I wanted her to hear silence, the kind that comes before collapse. We launched at midnight. No countdown, no press embargo, just a line of code pushed to the public repo and a cryptic tweet from an account with 0 followers. Original vision, clean slate, let's begin. It spread like fire. By morning, our waitlist had tripled. Forums exploded. Our old clients, the real ones, the early adopters who remembered the first engine, started reaching out. Not with questions, but with quiet declarations. "We're switching. We've missed this. We're back." And still, not a single name attached. No face, just code, performance, and results. Until someone leaked the dollar, a photo, crumpled bill, scotch taped to a wall with the words scrawled above it. This is what they sold it for. The internet did the rest. They connected the dots. They found the clause, the lawyers, the notary record. Someone even pulled a screen grab from an internal video, Amanda sneering during a QA session, dismissing founder romanticism as a liability. It backfired. That clip went viral. Now the world had its villain, and I had mine. They tried to hit back with a live stream. Amanda, Jonathan, and some new hire in a blazer 3 sizes too big, all smiling like crash test dummies. "We support innovation," Amanda said, "and we believe in healthy competition." Her voice shook. It was subtle, but I heard it. So did everyone else. The comments were brutal. "Where's the founder? What happened to the engine? Why is everyone leaving?" We didn't respond. We released features, silent ones. A new visual parser that reduced analysis time by 30. An onboarding flow so seamless, people filmed their reactions and posted them with hashtags. Real build, not corporate. Claire leaked the Amanda logs through an anonymous proxy, just enough to raise eyebrows, not enough for a lawsuit. Users started asking the right questions. Shareholders too. Amanda went dark, then came the final blow. We booked a public hall downtown, small, industrial, no lights, no stage, just folding chairs and an AV setup. Invite only, legacy users, builders, clients. The ones who mattered. We called it Return 1. I stood at the front, no mic, no speech, just the code projected behind me. Lines of it, elegant, lean, undeniable. "Some of you were there when this started," I said. "Some of you helped shape it, and some of you watched it get taken, twisted, diluted." I paused, looked at Mason, at Claire, at every pair of eyes staring back. This isn't a reboot. This is a reversal, not revenge, restoration. I held up the framed dollar. This was the price, not just for the company, for the soul of the work. And then I dropped it. The frame shattered. No applause, just the sound of glass and breath and recognition. That night, we hit 1 million active users. The next day, their stock dropped 14, and by Friday, Amanda resigned. Personal reasons. Of course, I walked past the old building that evening, lobby still spotless, logo still glowing, but something had changed. A man stood outside, staring at the glass. He wore one of our new hoodies, the kind only internal testers got. I didn't say anything, just nodded once. He nodded back, and I walked on. No victory lap. No fanfare, just the quiet satisfaction of knowing they tried to erase me, and now every user carried a piece of me in their code, and they'd never take that back. I returned to the warehouse the next morning. Everyone was gone, just cables, a few half-empty coffee cups, the trace smell of burnt solder. Sunlight streamed through the broken skylight, slicing the dust into golden bars. I stood alone in the silence we'd built together. The wall still held our final diagram. Half-erased arrows, a fingerprint in marker near the edge. I didn't touch it. I walked to the far corner where the old server rack used to be and opened the locked cabinet. Inside, the framed dollar, or what was left of it, Cracked glass, bent frame, the bill still folded where I'd left it, creased down the middle like a wound half healed. I took it out, slipped it into my pocket. Outside, the street was quiet, city still waking up. Somewhere a delivery truck honked twice, a cyclist cursed at a cab. I kept walking, past the old office, past the cafe we used to crash in, past the bench where Mason once slept the night before our first launch. Nobody looked up. Nobody stared. But they didn't have to, because now every screen they touched bore the weight of what we built, and the echo of what we refused to let die. I turned a corner, pulled out the dollar, looked at it one last time, then slid it into a mailbox. No note, no signature, just the truth.